Hello, and welcome to today's webinar on attracting and retaining international talent for your business. I'm Chris McLeod, and I'll be hosting today's session for Edmonton Global. Before we begin, I want to thank Canada's Trade Commissioner Service and staff at Canadian embassies around the world for their help and support in promoting this webinar. We're live from the Edmonton International Airport. This is Canada's largest airport by size, and thanks to circumpolar routes, the closest airport in North America to Asia. Canada is a country made up of immigrants. Our Indigenous peoples came here some 14,000 years ago, and we've seen a steady influx of migration over the last 400 years. In the beginning, migration was almost exclusively from the UK and France. Today, we see immigration from all over the world, led by China, India, and the Philippines. Here in the Edmonton metropolitan region, almost a quarter of our population are first-generation Canadians, and that number is growing every year. Part of what's driving immigration today, both in temporary workers and in residents, is that companies looking to build and grow teams in North America are increasingly looking to Canada rather than the United States. The Edmonton metropolitan region is young. We're one of the youngest communities in Canada and have been ranked as the best city for youth and youth work. We're educated, with 7 large public universities, colleges, and polytechnics, with a combined 130,000 students. And we're growing. Our region is one of the fastest growing regions in Canada, and our trade growth has been double the national average the last 10 years and is the strongest in Canada. This is an exciting place to be, and we definitely want you here. We're going to start today's discussion with Doug Peterson, a lawyer and partner in DHP Business Counsel. Doug represents private companies in various stages of development, specializing in corporate commercial law with an emphasis on international business transactions. He has represented several companies in transactions with Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon. Doug, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a great honor to be here.
Wonderful. So we'll start with just with some questions here for you, Doug. You've got significant experience working with tech companies from all over the world, helping them bring their teams into Canada, navigate taxes and policies. What's the first piece of advice you give a company when they're considering moving to Canada?
First piece of advice I give them is to get educated. And I'd say 2 things with that: flexibility and patience. Yeah. And a lot of times, due to some of the advantageous policies we have, maybe specific to tax laws, it's getting to a position to understand what kind of structure you need that may not work for other companies, but works for you. So it's working with the right service providers to say, what is it you want to accomplish, all right? And then creating that right structure that can take advantage of the tax laws, the employment laws, the immigration laws, to create the right entity, the right structure for that particular company.
All right, so everybody is particular to them.
Yes, and sometimes people get stuck in the, well, this is how I've done it elsewhere, this is how I have to do it here. And if you don't set up properly to begin, you're going to have problems as you go. So you kind of have to look at the short-term needs, but also more importantly, your long-term goals and your long-term needs.
Oh, that's great advice. So we have companies joining us from who currently have teams in the US and are increasingly having challenges bringing in international talent, and also companies looking to North America really for their first expansion. What's your perspective on the relative ease of building a team in Canada for the first time, especially in comparison to the US?
Well, I think right now our government, both federally, provincially, is immigration friendly. Yeah. And we have the policies in place compared to, say, the current regime and the protectionist views that you're getting with other particular countries, especially the United States. And because of that, I think that gives us an advantage in that aspect. The other is there's going to be a lot of talk by the other experts today on some of the advantages that Edmonton offers with respect to cost of living and all that. And those are all things that need to be kept in mind. But I think if you come back to, okay, what advantages may we have over the United States? And I think the biggest one is looking at those things combined with the advantageous laws that we have, which I think make it a very, very attractive place for a company to operate. With respect to the NAFTA agreement, it allows you to bring workers into Canada and then possibly work with your United States operations, and that's fairly easy under those particular trade agreements. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the biggest advantages we have.
Oh, that's fantastic. So it sounds like it's pretty complex too, between NAFTA, taxes, immigration law. Should companies try to navigate this on their own? And what advice do you have, especially on that first step?
Simple answer is no. Don't try and navigate it on your own.
Good.
It's too complex. I mean, I've been helping Canadian companies go into different countries for over 25 years and helping other companies from other countries come into Canada. And the first thing I always do is I get the local expertise. And this is a great organization, Edmonton Global, that can introduce those companies that have an interest to those right service providers. The second thing is, because it is so complex, sometimes, again, there's no cookie cutter solution. So a small tech company which may not have the financial resources, without sounding a little bit critical, doesn't maybe want to hire a KPMG, which is going to be beyond their financial means. They may want to look at other service providers, especially those that have some unique talents that have worked with companies in the past similar.
Yeah.
So I guess my first piece of advice is talk to organizations like Edmonton Global, let them understand your company, and then they will find the right service provider that meets your needs. And I think that's my best piece of advice I think I can give.
That's great advice, and thanks for the plug. So no one likes surprises in something as complex as immigration and moving to a new country. Is there a common misconception or issue that companies should be ready for and really to help them mitigate the impact?
Yeah, I think the two misconception again is as we come from a cultural situation where we're used to doing things legally a certain way. And every country has unique differences in their laws. And I always talk about the iceberg effect. An iceberg, you can see the top pretty easy, but the more important stuff is below the surface. And that's where you have to be careful. So usually I talk about with companies, two main things, taxes and immigration. And if you're looking to bring in individuals and to hire that talent, that's going to be a big factor on that individual's tax rates, depending on what kind of country they're coming from. For instance, Americans are taxed no matter where they move based on citizenship, other countries. And then we have to look at those tax treaties. So to say, well, I'm going to do this, I'm going to bring in employees from this country, that may not be as easy as looking at other sources. And then, of course, building from within Canada, I think, is the most important. Our local talent here.
And we have a ton of talent here, which we'll get to. So again, thanks so much, Doug. And I'm sure we're going to have a lot more questions for you as we get to the round table portion of the discussion. So if you have questions for Doug or anyone else on our panel, please add them into the chat, and we'll do our best either to get to them during the webinar or we'll follow up with you individually in the next couple of days. This brings us to our first poll. So we want to know a little bit about you and your goals. Are you looking to locate a team in Canada, to personally move to Canada for work, to come here to study at one of our colleges, universities, or polytechnics, or for something else? And a lot of immigrants to Canada start as international students. And Canada has programs to help them stay after graduation, find work, and start on that path to citizenship. So next, I'm joined by Kamari Achbar-Morrison and Lubna Ahmed from the University of Alberta International Student Services. Kamari and Lubna, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, well, it's wonderful that you're here. And the University of Alberta is just such an incredible institution in this entire region, and really in all of Alberta and Canada. So Kamari, the first question's for you, and it's really quite broad. What attracts students to the University of Alberta, and are there common factors?
So when I think about the 7,500 international students that we have at the University of Alberta, the story's a little bit different for graduate students versus undergrad. For graduate students, very much it's the quality of teaching and research. It's the availability for international students at the master's level and the PhD level to get funding. If I think about the complement of teaching staff, we have over 33% of our faculty that has their education from elsewhere. So it's a very diverse as well as innovative teaching and research facilities that we have at the University of Alberta.
And I'll just
Sure.
ask too, I think Canada as a whole really puts a lot of emphasis on international students. Do you know what the economic impact of international students is on the country?
My goodness, the recent figures are something like $22 billion to GDP, and over 170,000 people that are employed in international education. So, if we think about why students come here as well, you asked for some common factors. Certainly it's the affordability of tuition, but when I think about, what I hear from our international students, it's very much that Canada has a reputation as a safe place that's very inclusive, both in terms of issues of equity, inclusion, diversity. Undergraduate students are particularly taken, parents especially, with that it's a safe location, that tuition is affordable, that cost of living is affordable. And
I know for me, I've got 2 kids in university, the affordability and safety certainly rank high for me.
Yeah, and that's what we hear from parents from China, from India, from Bangladesh, from France, from Zimbabwe, Nigeria. So if we look at our global complexity of where our students are coming from, and when I think about, there's 5 million students that are looking for university places globally, the fact that we have people choosing Edmonton, what I hear over and over again is, you've got everything here from Azerbaijan to Zimbabwe, and what we really appreciate is that ability to make connections. But many students say it's also the fact that post-graduation employment is an opportunity in Canada. So
and that's a great
factor.
segue to Lubna's questions here as well. So thanks so much for that, Kumari. So Lubna, for someone listening in from another part of the world, considering coming here to study, again, it can be really intimidating to know where to start. What advice do you have, and what kind of support does your team provide?
Yeah, for sure. I'd be happy to talk about that. Well, as Kumari mentioned, Canada is definitely an attractive destination for international students, and mainly because of the attractive immigration package that they offer students, which allow them to work during their studies and after their studies, and multiple pathways to become permanent residents. And the first step is to get admission, secure admission, and then apply for your study permit. And definitely University of Alberta is another popular destination. We offer over 200 undergraduate programs, over 500 graduate programs in 300 research areas. And our team is there to try to support the students from the get-go. So,
and it doesn't just stop with the academics, because you also support them when they're finishing or trying to work during their programs as well as afterwards, correct?
So prior to coming, we provide the support. During their stay, they need to maintain their immigration status, so we make sure that they understand what they need to do and when to do it, and be on top of that. And then later on, when they successfully complete their program, we also support them in the process of applying for the post-graduation work permit. In addition to the immigration side of things, we do run a variety of programs to support students during their stay, to make the quality of their experience a little bit better than having them to try to figure things out on their own.
That's a great point, and it's I think probably for the two of you, it's not just about having someone come here and study. Really it's about getting a sense of Canada, getting a sense of our community. Ideally, we want people to stay. Can you just talk to kind of the community feeling that you're trying to really create and help them be part of?
So when we have programs with peer programs, we have programs within the faculties that help students do a lot of casework. So during that, you find that students not only build connections to other international students, but to domestic students. And that's where it lends itself to getting to know your community. Many international students tell us that one of the reasons why they prefer Edmonton as a location is because of its diversity, and there are not, there are larger populations from your own language group, but in terms of you just, having a myriad of people to practice and develop your language skills as well as your personal interests, there are many community things to get involved with. So, you want to try out winter sports because you've never done that before, or you want to, practice your home cooking. Those are all things that are here and available in Edmonton.
Wonderful. So, Why does Canada, and really all of the universities and colleges and polytechnics here in our region, and there's 6 others in addition to the U of A, why do you put so much emphasis on attracting international students and as well as helping them stay after graduation?
So, you know, as I was saying earlier, there are over 5 million students globally that are looking for post-secondary positions. And when we think about, you know, what that means in terms of just the economics of it all, every province across Canada has seen an increase in international student spending. Not only in terms of domestic travel, but goods and services, let alone, you know, just tuition and education. But primarily, when we look at what international students bring, so the fact that, you know, you were born somewhere, you are studying somewhere, you might choose to work elsewhere, that is leading to a very organic, large global network of a transfer of knowledge, as well as a transfer of connections. Yeah. So you want to know what the distribution system is like in China, and you have someone on in your business program that is from China, then you understand the nuances much more than if your team was just made up of locals. So it's a multiplier effect on a personal level as well as on an economic level.
Yeah. That's a great answer. And I think too, when we look at some of the huge value that migrants to Canada, who are now citizens of Canada, who've had a connection to the U of A or some of the other schools, just how much they've added to this country and to this community. You know, I think about Michael Houghton, who was just awarded the Nobel Prize in physiology and medicine in recognition for his work in hepatitis C. People like Richard Sutton, who's really a world leader in AI and machine learning, and really he pioneered the entire field of reinforcement learning. So we've got just amazing people that are here, that are calling this place home, and really, you know, were raised someplace else or started their life someplace else in the country. So again, Kumari and Lubna, thanks so much. We'll again have more questions for the two of you during our roundtable. And remember, if you'd like to ask a question, please write it into the chat. We'll do our best to get to them, and we'll also follow up with people individually if we can't get to them all during the session. Our next audience poll is about why Canada. Are you choosing Canada because it's safety and security, for its best in the world education systems, because we're open, welcoming of all nationalities, religions, and genders, and orientations, for economic opportunity, or maybe it's for all of the above? Our final discussion is with Hannah Kuspira, Senior Recruiter with Robert Half Technology, and Marcin Mizanti, Vice President of Data Science at Alta ML, one of Canada's fastest growing AI companies. Welcome, and thanks to the two of you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Thank you for having me.
So Marcin, let's start with you. We just heard Kumari and Lubna talk about the pathway from being an international student to becoming a Canadian. That's very much your story. You came here from Poland as a PhD student. Your wife came over. Now you've got 3 little kids that are all going to school here. How does your story really line up with what their goals are?
Yes, and I must say what Kumari and Lubna told really resonated with me. Moving to a new country, it's challenging, scary, but also exciting, especially when you have such a supporting system. You have all these other international students. Everyone is sharing their experiences and their culture. It's really amazing, and you can quickly forget that you're so far away from home and find yourself here. So there is a lot of support from University of Alberta, a lot of support from government. Students here can work off campus. They can have some industrial experience. What was really important for me, my wife could join me here, and she was welcome with a open work permit. In US, it's visitor visa where they cannot work, spouses cannot work.
And if you don't have your wife, you don't have happiness.
Yes, happy wife, happy life. So a lot of that resonates, and a lot of support as you continue studying permanent residency. That was a big factor for me for staying in Canada.
So in addition to that permanent residency and having your wife come here, what really kept you here in the Edmonton metropolitan region? Is it, you know, how did quality of life and work and those things fit together?
Yes, and so Canada, it's not only Edmonton, there's multiple cities, but what spoke to me, it's in my field, University of Alberta is top of the world in artificial intelligence, and there's a lot of companies starting around that field. We're working on very exciting problems. There is also affordability. It's possible to buy a house, and you don't stuck in the traffic for 1-2 hours per day. Yeah. It takes me 15 minutes to get to the downtown from where I live.
Yeah, that's outstanding. So Hannah, Marston spoke just a little bit about quality of life and how important that was in his decision to live here. You're helping companies attract talent to the region. How much does quality of life play into that decision?
It's pivotal. It's one of the biggest pieces to for companies that are bringing talent here. It's helpful to know that they'll be able to keep that talent here when they arrive, and that's a big concern. Retention is a big thing for companies. It costs a lot of money to recruit. It's very expensive, so you want to make sure that your people will stay, and quality of life makes a big difference. So having a family-friendly environment to raise your children in, safety, as we mentioned earlier, having a great innovative community, especially in technology, where you've kind of found your home, it's massive. It makes a big difference to the way the whole community comes together. And then also having the kind of culture around being outside. Even though we live in a very cold place in the middle of winter, it is very accessible to get into the river valley. We have 150 kilometers of parks within the city. That is
the largest urban forest in North America.
Yes, exactly. And we also have, a random fact, more people who are yogis per capita than any place in North America as well.
Really? And apparently more golf courses per capita than any other place in the world too.
We're just a very active community. You know, we like to be outside. We like to engage with each other in nature while also being in a city, and it makes a huge difference to people's quality of life.
Yeah, that's outstanding. And I think those of us who live here really believe it.
100%.
You know, whether it's getting into the river valley, getting into the country, you know, the mountains are just down the road.
Yep.
I think we've got, 5 or 6 UNESCO World Heritage Sites within a half-a-day drive of this community. So it really is an incredible place to live.
Absolutely.
And the Edmonton region is regularly ranked as one of the top communities in the world for tech talent, you know, as both have talked about. And in particular, we're one of the top 10 cities in North America for the affordability of talent. And that's really a great combination for companies, especially when compared to the lowest tax rates, some of the lowest tax rates in North America, the lowest in Canada. And we usually have about a 25 to 30% discount on payroll compared to teams that are based in the United States. And that's, again, some of the big benefits for companies. For individual employees, the Edmonton region is the most affordable region in Canada. In particular, as Marston said, when it comes to owning a home, the cost of owning a home here is way lower than Vancouver or Toronto or other big tech hubs like in the Silicon Valley. You can actually afford to have a life here and actually live a life. So Hannah, while it's more affordable here, how do salaries compare?
So salaries are really interesting across, we'll look at Canada kind of first, and then I'll talk more about comparative to the US. So in Edmonton, our tech salaries specifically are about 1.5% higher than the average across the country. When you compare that to, say, Vancouver and Toronto, they're about 3% higher than what it is average across the country. So when you look at the fact that in Vancouver, it's about a 14% higher cost of living, and then in Toronto, it's about a 20% higher cost of living, and you compare that to the, say, 1.5% more that you'll earn, the salary stretches a lot further when you live in Edmonton. So that makes a massive difference when you have talent here that can afford to live here and live well here, and then they want to stay here as well.
Yeah, and I'll just mention that on that there's been a number of rankings and studies done on that affordability piece. And Edmonton, of all the major cities in the country, has the biggest benefit from the cost of living compared to salary.
Yeah.
That gap of disposable income is larger here than any other place in the country.
It's huge, yeah. And then the interesting thing too is we have a variety of clients in the tech space that are US, their customer base is in the US, so they're making revenue in US dollars. And they host most of their software development and application support teams out of Edmonton specifically. And the benefits of doing that is if you look at, say, a junior developer's salary, just as an example, in in the US, the average is about $95,000, give or take, dollars, a junior developer salary.
US dollars?
US dollars, yeah. And then if you compare that to the Canadian, so Canadian dollars, it's about 65,000 Canadian dollars. So when I did this yesterday using the rates yesterday, so it may have changed for today, but that's about 51,000 US dollars. So when you compare paying a junior developer 97,000 US dollars or 51,000 US dollars, but still knowing that you're paying talent and they have that gap, that disparity between what they can afford to do with that, while also being paid enough, like that is an incredibly attractive thing for employers that we work with.
Absolutely. And again, we've got some of the best and top talent in the world here.
100%.
So Marcin, just kind of the last question before we get into the panel. You're in a senior role here, you're building your own team here. Can you talk a bit about what it's like to now be on the hiring end? So you're actually recruiting students out of the U of A, out of NAIT, McEwen, the other schools that are here. You're building teams, pulling in people from other parts of the world. What's it like from the employer's point of view?
Yeah, that's a bit different perspective for sure, but it really helps that I went through that process. When having to experience what it is to get a work permit, what it is to get a permanent residency, I can speak to that. I can actually go and talk with the people and tell them about those processes. A lot of students still have questions. They want to have someone who has experience with that, who went through the process, and they can go to GSA, International Student Associations at university, or they can talk with employers. A lot of that is taking advantage of this amazing talent that is here at the University of Alberta and other universities. There's a lot of people, and they actually want to stay. For a long time in AI, it's pretty new field. There are not too many companies, but right now there's a lot of companies looking for talent, and people want to stay in Edmonton because of all these factors that we talk about.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And your CEO, Corey Jansen, in another thing we're doing as part of the World Summit AI, talked about the Edmonton region being probably the only place in the world that has the high level of AI talent, but we actually have a surplus of it. We've got more talent than what we can use right now. So if you are a company looking to come into the region, for all the things that have been talked about, this is an outstanding place and an outstanding time to come. So again, Marcin and Hannah, thanks so much for sharing your perspectives. Let's bring back the rest of our panel now. And again, thanks again, everyone. So let's as we start this panel discussion, let's begin with Kumari and Lubna. So I wonder what you were thinking as you just heard Marcin talk about his experience. Again, a great success story coming out of your program. And both of you also came as international students, decided to stay here, live here, working here, raising families here. How did his comments resonate with your own experience?
So I'm really glad that you had a positive experience, because that's what we work hard towards. But what I think what I kept hearing is that connection that you were able to make through your academic program, and then translate that into work experience, and then through that have a community that really allowed your family to be supported. And I think that that's a key, that very early on in the experience, to be able to make those personal connections. If I think about myself as well, that was a factor in deciding to stay here. And I think
for me, I actually came as an immigrant first, and then decided to do a master's at the University of Alberta for the reasons we talked about, the quality of education there. But definitely, it's a success story that we see all the time. We're fortunate to be working with international students, and it just gives us a sense of gratification when we see a success story like that. For students who come here, not knowing where the road is going to lead them, but then ultimately find success and become permanent residents and move on to become Canadian citizens that actually, like Kumari mentioned, support the Canadian economy.
Yeah, and really that is the story of Canada. I mean, even if we look at the panel, I think all of you except for Doug and I don't know if you were born here, Doug, but everyone else is from someplace else. Our camera crew and kind of technical team behind, their family backgrounds are Lebanon and Afghanistan. So again, this is what Canada's about. It is a country that has just so much richness for the immigrants who've come to this country and are now calling it home. So just switching gears a little bit, Doug and Hannah, again, thinking about Marston's comments, especially about building a team here. What were your kind of big takeaways from building a team in Canada, pulling people in? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Marston's story is one that I think a lot of newer international people should hear and be encouraged by. It's really great to hear of success like this, and it is possible for teams to attract that talent and to hold it in the Edmonton region. And I think what Marston mentioned about building his team, and there's a lot of employers who understand that experience. And I think that sometimes we're hesitant to ask those questions when we're going through a hiring process of, what was your experience like, and can you help support me through that? And because we're such an international community as a whole, I think leveraging, employers such as yourself and understanding that you have that experience, that's part of the value of being employed by someone in the Edmonton region.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all the comments that have been made with respect to that particular topic, and I think the thing that makes Edmonton very unique in the ability to build talent or build a team here is both, again, back to we have some very, very favorable immigration laws. We have great talent here, and the ability to combine those two by using the local talent but also being able to bring in international talent. Mm-hmm. And the cost of living and all those other things makes it a very, very attractive place.
So how long does it typically take to bring somebody in? Like, let's say that you were a company based in Asia somewhere. You had a core team that you were wanting to set up and then draw on local talent. Kind of how long does it normally take to get someone in and running?
Well, it's an interesting question. It's a difficult answer, but the thing that's really unique about what's happening today, if we look at how the world has changed because of COVID-19, so we're seeing situations where presently it is difficult because of quarantine restrictions. But what's nice is, and what we've done in the past, is you can bring in workers basically, and they can be here working. They're not considered here other than visitors. We can go through those stages, and we can get their temporary work visa, mm-hmm. and then if required, we can get their permanent work visa. At the same time, we're building the company, doing those things in the background to create tax advantages. And I think that's what's important to understand is you don't have to, okay, I can't move forward until I have all these things in place. The world's very fluid. And I mean, I worked with one company out of Silicon Valley for over 2 years before they finally decided to make that next step and have a permanent establishment here. They just had a few employees to start with, and then they expanded from that.
Wow. And it can happen pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think what you had said now, I think there's some flexibility in the way companies are operating and the way that they can transition and bring in people from across the globe. Everything's in flux because of COVID-19, but I think this is a way that we can really benefit from having a little bit more flexibility around the model with which you bring talent into the region.
Yeah, and just as a little kind of story, we were at a performance at the Citadel Theatre back in the fall, so back before COVID happened, and I think 2 or 3 of the performers were injured after their debut, and they brought in 2 or 3 new performers from New York that performed the next night. So they were able to actually do, within a 24-hour turnaround, find 2 new performers, get them on planes, get them here, get them rehearsed, and perform. So that just speaks to, I think, how quickly sometimes we can get people in here to be working and doing things. Yeah. So if they can do it in theater, they can certainly do it at companies like Ulta ML. So if you're advising an international company considering a move into Canada, beyond kind of the legal advice and kind of that process, what kind of things should companies be considering? So Marston, maybe we'll start with you. So from the perspective of already being here, what are some of the benefits of being here? What should companies be considering as they're thinking about coming into the region?
Speaking from the perspective of AI, I know there's many different industries, but it's one of the top universities, and there is, as you mentioned before, a surplus of talent. There's few companies that realized, like Google, DeepMind, the first international office was in Edmonton, in large thanks to Rich Sutton at the University of Alberta. I think this access to talent, there's a lot of talented people. From what I heard, a lot of software developers are becoming reliability engineers at Google, this very, very prestigious position there. So there's a lot of talent, and a lot of people are forced to actually move outside of the city. But and a lot of people thought that's the case because of the weather. You know, it's a bit cold here.
Only in the winter.
Only in the winter. Summer is gorgeous, but it's actually not the case. I think a lot of people would like to stay, but there was not so many opportunities. So there's definitely companies coming here will find a lot of people eager to work and easy access to talent.
So just bridging from that talent, I'm wondering again, Lubna.
Yeah, I was just thinking when Marcin was talking, like it's important for the employer to know, like anyone wanting to move to Edmonton and set up business here, to know, be familiar, as was mentioned earlier, conversations of that it is possible to hire international students. And international students are really eager to start getting their Canadian work experience. And if you come to Edmonton, you have, like we said, a pool of over 7,000 international students that bring in a diverse quality of talents and expertise. And so having that pool to choose from, and it's for the company as well, like giving the opportunity for the student to get that work experience, albeit it'll have to be part-time for most graduate students because they can't work more than 20 hours a week. But giving them that opportunity, you're training them to become future employees and make sure before you give them a full-time contract that you know what they're capable of. So just being familiar with the regulations, how am I able to recruit international students, and later on when they become a postgraduate work permit holder.
Okay. That's great. So that's kind of the company perspective. Would that change at all if you're actually talking about an individual? So, giving advice to what should they be considering. We talked a little bit about affordability. We talked a little bit about quality life. Like, what should people be thinking about if they're looking to move to Canada, move to this region? What should kind of they be thinking about? Kamara, you look like you're about to.
Yeah, it's one of those unexpected places that if you don't know a lot about Edmonton, you don't, and then you come here, it's, when I think about my own personal journey, just in terms of, say, the introduction to Indigenous culture, to the introduction to sustainable ways of living, the marry between, if I think, just within the university sector, between, biomechanics and new technologies and virology, and all of these burgeoning fields, which we have such depth here, but at the same time, we're very innovative. And then you marry that with the history of the different settlements of peoples and the exposure to not only the variety of ethnic diversity, but as I said, the concept of living. What does it mean to be an active, civic-minded person contributing to a sustainable economy, also cognizant of all of the ways in which we have conflicts from the past that we still have to resolve. When I think of Edmonton and I think of our opportunity to engage and really become not only local citizens but global citizens, I mean, it's my soapbox. I just feel that it gives us that in such an authentic way. So that's why I'm passionate about being here.
Doug?
I don't know if they're necessarily mutually exclusive. I mean, to me, a company's greatest asset is its employees and its people. And I've had situations where we'll have offices in Phoenix or down in Silicon Valley, and that ability to go back and forth. But I mean, if we're attractive to the individual, and the one word that always comes to mind if I look at my experience is stability. And I found that Canada has been very stable in their policies that allow that long-term thinking versus, without disrespect, this back and forth with protectionist policies based on who's in power in a certain country. And that stability leads to an advantage to both the individual who's with the company and also the companies itself. And they work together. I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to build on that too, I absolutely agree that they're not mutually exclusive by any means. I think that one of the biggest things that I encourage employers and employees, new people to Canada at whatever level of experience, from new graduate all the way up through some years of technical experience, I think one of the most critical things is getting involved in the community here. And sometimes we have a tendency to maybe not realize how deep you can get involved. There's so many opportunities to network with different employers, network with different groups that specialize in things that you care about and you find are important to you. And I think that sometimes gets missed with the companies that I work with and with the candidates that I work with, who are maybe new and just kind of expect that a job is going to be there for them, because there are lots of opportunities here. But there's so much that needs to be done when it comes to really engaging in your community in whatever sector you like to work in.
And I think the Edmonton metro region is fairly unique with that. That we really are a community of volunteers. We've got more festivals that happen here than we have weekends.
Yep.
We've got the second largest fringe festival in the world. We've got the largest heritage festival in the world. We've got just so many things that are happening, whether it's volunteering with kids' sports right up to major international conferences. And I think this is a community that really relies on volunteers. So if you want to be involved as someone new to the community, there's a way to get there. And I think too that even from a corporate perspective, we're pretty flat community. It's not hard to pick up the phone and talk to the vice president of data at one of the country's best AI companies. It's not hard to pick up the phone and talk to a leading lawyer in Western Canada. Where I think in a lot of other places it's difficult to do that.
Yeah.
So I just wonder your perspective on that.
I can start. I mean, I also teach at the university, and I always tell my students that be very careful burning bridges, because Edmonton is a small community.
Yeah.
I mean, Corey was my student, and I worked with Corey before. The other thing I want to say is when I worked with the company that got acquired by Apple, in hindsight, I talked to some of them. What they did is they tried to move the team down to Silicon Valley. And I even had the discussion with one of them just this week, and he said, in hindsight, we wish we would have just created that office in Edmonton and left them there, mainly for the reasons that Hannah alluded to. And so I think that's something to keep in mind, that again, you don't have to necessarily, again, only be operated in Edmonton. There's a way to do it, but take advantage of the great, tax laws, employment stability, community that we have here.
Okay, that's a great point. So we're on to our last question now. And again, every one of you could live anywhere in Canada, really anywhere in the world. What is it that keeps you here in this community, in the Edmonton metropolitan region? Hannah, let's maybe start with you.
Sure. I knew this question was coming. This one's a hard one for me. I think now that I have engaged more and more in this community, this technology industry in Edmonton, the innovation that is happening here keeps me engaged as someone in business in this industry. There is so many interesting things happening, and the community aspect of it is something that I just love and just want to continue to propagate and participate in.
Fantastic. Marcy?
Yes, to add on top of that, the city is really family friendly. It's really easy to raise a family. I have my wife and 3 kids, so it's really important, but also a lot of opportunities, a lot of innovation happening, and great talent, great people to work with.
Wonderful. Doug?
Again, that community, ease of living, and it's pretty easy to get on a plane and go somewhere warm for a couple of weeks. That's the only negative I ever get of Edmonton is the weather, and that's easily mitigated with a few trips. And you can afford to do that because of our cost of living.
Exactly. Kumar?
I think very much so. It's that opportunity to just, challenge yourself, to think differently, to really think about, what does, equity mean? What does inclusiveness mean? What does diversity mean? But to do that in an environment where there's lots of big blue sky, we mentioned the River Valley before, and to have small pockets of, as I said, everything from, Azerbaijan to Zimbabwe.
For me, I personally love living in Edmonton because of the welcoming nature. Being a little bit different than the mainstream Canadian, it was important to find a community that's accepting of my difference within the community. So as a Muslim woman who wears a hijab, it really feels like home. I am not alienated, especially now with the growing sentiment in some countries against immigrants and refugees. So it really is a welcoming place, and I would recommend it for anyone wishing to come to Canada, for sure.
I love that comment, and I'll just say that we're all mainstream Canadians.
Thank you.
So again, thanks to everyone for being part of this conversation. I hope that you found it valuable. We'll be sharing this recording along with some additional information to everyone who's registered. And again, we'll be able to answer any questions that we weren't able to get to by email. So keep an eye in your email box. So Doug, Kumari, Lubna, Marcin, Hannah, again, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks so much. We really enjoyed your expertise, your comments, your experience, and of course, value your time. If you want to know more about Edmonton Global and the opportunities all across the Edmonton metropolitan region, please visit us at edmontonglobal.ca, and you can also follow us on social media. Again, thanks so much for being here. We hope to see you soon. And for those of you who are looking for a little more Edmonton Global content this morning, in about 45 minutes, we'll be going live with another conversation, this time with someone from the Government of Canada, talking a little bit more about immigration and becoming a citizen of this great country. So again, thanks so much, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of the day.